Hello everyone, this is Tom in LA. I hope you're doing well. I'm doing a tag video today. It's a tag that's been created by Noah at Everyone Who Reads Him Must Converse. It's been catching up. I saw a few of the people who did this tag, and I find it really interesting because it changes a lot depending on what somebody defines as perfection and how literal somebody takes that as a definition. I was actually tagged for this video by Jordan Parsons and also by Christina at Knitting Books, etc. And both of them did really cool and interesting videos with their own interpretation of perfection. It was kind of funny how in under Jordan's video, both Jordan and Pi from Attention basically prohibited me from including anything by Dante in my list. So I'm going to comply with that, and I'm going to exclude anything that's been written by Dante. It would be too predictable in my case, and I will also exclude anything that has a religious background. I'm going to think about, I have thought about my 5 perfect novels, and it's quite provocative and challenging as a request, because in my case, I'm not going to even try to give it a technical definition. I'm just going straight for the metaphorical perfection, because otherwise it's almost like thinking about a friend. In my case, thinking about the 5 perfect novels, it's almost like thinking about 5 perfect friends. And I can say that I have friends who are perfect, but in no way it means in a technical way or in an ideal way. So these are my 5 perfect books. In fact, a funny thing is that I don't have any of these physically here in my house in Los Angeles, because I read them some time ago, and they're back in my parents' house in Italy. So I'm going to show them the covers here of the English versions. So I'm starting from a big Italian classic, which is The Betrothed, or I Promessi Sposi, by Alessandro Manzoni. This is a big Italian classic. It was published in 1825 or 27. It's one of those classics that in every Italian school they will force down your throat until no matter what, you're gonna hate it. It's very, very strange if a 14, 15-year-old Italian comes out of school saying, I really love The Betrothed, because the way it's been handled in most schools, you end up not liking it a lot. At least I'm talking about my experience, but I've also heard a lot of Italians say the same. What happened, like in many other cases, a little seed stays in your heart, and then later on in life you go back to it, and then you're free to love it, to give it your experience and the various thickness of layers of your experience. So that's exactly what happened to me. I think I reread it maybe 10 years after my high school, found a lot of meaning that I didn't realize was there in the first place, and then reread it, listened to audiobook. It's just wonderful. It's a wonderful, wonderful depiction of northern Italy in the 1600s, in 2 normal, how can you say, peasant level type of protagonists, Renzo and Lucia. And they are such a famous couple for Italian culture as Paolo and Francesca in the Divine Comedy. Renzo and Lucia and Paolo and Francesca are the most famous literary couples in Italian literature. And but once you look into it, not only it's a very transparent and extremely well written description of the Italy of those times, but the characterization, the expressions, the dialogues, the colors, and the Italian culture, because Italian culture has been made of many things, including, especially in the north, but in the south as well, foreign domination, the Catholic Church. All those elements come together to give you a perfect portrait of Italy, not only in those moments, but also metaphorically above that. And so I really, really love that. And I would say it's one of my favorites. Number two, it's a science fiction novel by one of my favorite authors, who's Robert Silverberg, and the title is Dying Inside. Dying Inside is a novel that talks about a man who has telepathic powers, but instead of going in almost stereotypical science fiction direction, the novel goes into a surprisingly intimate, philosophical and humanistic direction. The protagonist is suffering an existential crisis because his telepathic powers are gradually waning. And the way he realizes that inside himself, the way he feels his powers more and more getting weaker and weaker is astounding. I personally think it's so powerful, it's so great, and many consider it Robert Silverberg's masterpiece. It's because it's so personal. I read it as the author talking about his own art, his own craft, his own imagination, and those juices, those powers of the young artist when he's in his 20s that later in life he cannot feel anymore. He still has it, but he doesn't feel the same type of energy. And this is why I think it came out so well when he wrote it. It's such a fantastic novel, and it's my number two. Number three is another Italian one. It's the Love Leopard, very famous, by Giuseppe Tomasi di Lampedusa. Talks about Sicily, talks about a nobility world that already around the end of the 19th century was waning, was disappearing. And there is a lot of nostalgia, there is a lot of... there's a big difference with The Betrothed. The Betrothed is a dynamic and all-encompassing novel, historical novel. The Leopard is a historical novel as well, but the direction in time that the Leopard looks into is the past. It's a novel that looks completely towards the past. Therefore, there is a lot of melancholy that's coming from a little bit of regret, but in general, all the melancholic feelings that come from memory, from remembering things that are not going to come back anymore. Another successful literary work, because the author was talking about himself. He thought about his own grandpa or great-grandpa for the main character of the Prince of Salina. And if you haven't read it, you just have to read it. It's unmissable. Number four, for me, is another science fiction novel, and it's possibly the best science fiction novel that I've ever read, and it's by Arthur C. Clarke, Sir Arthur Clarke, and the novel is Childhood's End. Short novel, but very complex. It encapsulates the reason why I love science fiction, which absolutely is not language, even though some science fiction works have great language, but Arthur Clarke was not a great wordsmith. The reason is that science fiction is a literature of ideas. The density of original and striking and wonderful ideas in this book is almost every 2 or 3 pages you're going to find such a powerful idea that your average science fiction writer, modern writer of today, would have to write a book or a series even around that one single idea without inventing anything else. That's how volcanic Arthur Clarke's mind was. This is what I love. I love the fact that science fiction throws ideas, throws this type of creative nuggets that stimulate your imagination, and then it throws another one, and then it throws another one. This type of constant stimulation is something I just love. The experience of in fact, this is actually one of the reasons why I've included as number 5 in this list, White Noise by DeLillo. That's my 5th novel, because even though it's not science fiction, it's some people call it postmodern, even though I feel like it's very different from many postmodern, more recent works. I remember loving it so much when I read it that I went back from the beginning as soon as I finished the book, and I felt such a familiarity with the tone, with the voice that the author used in writing this book. And at the same time, like I mentioned, in every page, in every paragraph, DeLillo throws and infuses ideas. In his case, obviously, they're not science fictional ideas, but they could be a specific metaphor or a particular joke or a particular word and terminology related idea. But this is the style of writing that it's a particular style of writing that really gets my imagination going. It's so stimulating. DeLillo in one interview once said that he prefers the sentence to the novel. He prefers the paragraph to the novel. And since we're talking about perfection and the perfect novel, the definition of perfection, I think, for DeLillo is encapsulating perfection in a single sentence rather than in the entire novel. Somehow he was able to apply this type of intensity of imagination and originality to every single sentence and every single paragraph of this novel, White Noise, from the beginning to the end. And that's why I think I loved it so much. So these are the five titles, and if you haven't heard about any of them, my suggestion, of course, is warmly to check them out. My final comment is about perfection in short stories. While I was thinking about this tag, I thought, if I really have to think about technical perfection, then my mind goes to short stories, because the short story format lends itself much more to something like perfection rather than the long format or the novel. If you think about, again, a person or a friend or somebody who you meet for the first time, it's probably much easier to think about a perfect evening together, going out to drink or going out to have dinner together, and that's perfect, rather than perfect 5 years together, which obviously for natural reasons, the 5 years will never be completely perfect. So the short story, in my opinion, lends itself to this definition of perfection. And the two short stories that I like to bring up as examples, because they stayed in my mind and I love them so much, and I brought them up in conversations in my life with friends and acquaintances, are science fiction stories. The first one is by an author. Her name was Wilmer Shiras. And Wilmer, I don't know it as a name, it sounds a little bit unusual, but some people actually thought it was a man writing, but it was in fact a woman. And Wilmer Shiras wrote a lot of award-winning science fiction stories as well. This one in particular, which was award-winning, maybe Hugo, I'm not sure, is titled In Hiding. And it's a story about gifted kids, gifted boys and girls, and the way that some of them led a life of in hiding, meaning pretending to not be as gifted as they were. In particular, one boy who, while taking his B's and C's at school, was conducting several hidden lives under pseudonyms and aliases, writing short stories for magazines, conducting scientific experiments in secret, without anybody knowing about that. And it's a real diamond. It's a real diamond if you can find it. It's called In Hiding. The other one is much more scientific, and it's by Henry Hasse. The title is He Who Shrank. He Who Shrank, a science fiction novella featured in the 1936 issue of Amazing Stories magazine. So it's quite dated, right? Almost 100 years. But it's so incredible, and I still think about it because the author imagined this brilliant but simple idea that while if you imagine a person who starts shrinking in size and constantly keeps shrinking in size without ever stopping, this person will get into the molecular structure of, for example, this chair or a table, and within the molecular structure, as he meets maybe germs and they become very big in front of him, but he keeps shrinking, therefore he falls into the crevices of the molecular structure and the molecules themselves, and then the atomic structure. And the atoms look to him as solar systems, as the universe. And he finds himself to be a giant who is shrinking within a universe, and then is being pulled by the gravity of a planet, and he keeps shrinking. So it's a journey that he makes throughout dimensions, constantly ever smaller and smaller, and it's incredible. It's incredible because it challenges even a modern assumption, which is that quantum theory and you know, atoms and neutrons and etc., those elements, electrons, etc., are the smallest ones that we know about in material reality. But he challenges that, and he says, are we sure about that? Everything tells me that inside an electron, given how mysterious our universe is, inside an electron there could be millions and billions of universes inside there. We don't know. So this is how imagination stretching these type of stories are, and that's why I love them so much. In any case, if you got to here, thank you so much for your patience, and I hope you enjoyed the video and the tag. Thank you again.